The night Henry left, the town felt too quiet, like even the wind didn't want to witness it. Crystal stood at the edge of her own porch light, holding her breath as if one more inhale would break her completely. He didn't slam a door, he didn't shout. He simply walked away with the kind of silence that cuts deeper than anger, because silence leaves you alone with every question. And the next morning, the sun still rose over the fields as if nothing had happened. The diner still opened, the clinic still filled with patients, the church bell still rang. But Crystal's life had split into a before and an after, and in the after, she had to learn how to stand upright while something inside her begged to collapse. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And somewhere between harvest seasons and winter storms, she stopped waiting for a miracle that came in the shape of a man. She built her own. She learned to live without him, not by forgetting, but by choosing herself every single day, even when it hurt. Henry became a story people whispered about. A name that sounded like a warning, a memory Crystal refused to touch, until the day he came back. Not with the same eyes, not with the same pride. He returned to that small town like a man carrying the weight of everything he never said, only to find that Crystal wasn't the broken girl he left behind. She was calm, radiant in a quiet way, strong in a way that scared him more than her tears ever could. And in that moment, one question hung between them like a storm cloud over open land. Was it too late? Because the final time Crystal looks at Henry, when the truth finally spills into the open, she won't beg. She won't chase. She'll decide. So stay until the end, because what she does in that last scene will change everything. If you believe love can be rebuilt, subscribe now and comment, "I choose healing, so I know you're with us." The sky over Willow Ridge was the color of bruised steel. A winter wind dragged across the fields, bending the dead cornstalks. Crystal watched from the farmhouse window, hands wrapped around a mug. The porch light made a small circle of warmth in the dark. Inside that circle, everything still looked safe, almost normal. But her chest already knew something had shifted. Some endings arrive before the words do. Henry's truck sat in the driveway like it didn't belong there anymore. The engine wasn't running, but the air felt loud with unsaid things. He moved through the kitchen slowly as if time were thicker. His coat was already on, his keys already in his palm. Crystal searched his face for a reason that wouldn't destroy her. He avoided her eyes like they were a mirror he couldn't bear, and the silence between them grew teeth. He had come home successful, promotion, praise, momentum, more money. The kind of success people in town called making it out. But it didn't soften him the way she thought it would. It made him restless, sharp-edged, terrified of being ordinary. And lately, whenever Crystal spoke about forever, he went quiet. As if love were a contract he might fail to uphold. As if her hope demanded perfection from him. Crystal stepped closer, her voice steady despite the tremor underneath. "Talk to me, Henry," she said, not pleading, inviting. She had learned long ago that love shouldn't need to beg. Henry swallowed, jaw tight, shoulders rising like armor. "I can't do this," he whispered, as if the words burned. Not "I don't love you," just "I can't do this." And that was somehow worse. Outside, the wind shoved against the windows like an impatient hand. The old clock above the sink ticked with merciless calm. Crystal's mind tried to build bridges, stress, pressure, exhaustion, anything. But Henry's eyes were far away, fixed on a future she couldn't enter. "I need space," he said, and the phrase felt like a blade. He said it like a man asking permission to run from himself, and the room tilted, just slightly under her feet. She didn't cry, not yet. She didn't throw a plate or shout or collapse into theatrical ruin. She only set her mug down carefully, like one wrong move would shatter it. "Space," she repeated, tasting the word like something spoiled. Henry nodded, relief flickering across his face for half a second. That flicker told her he had rehearsed this escape in private, and it made her stomach turn cold. Crystal followed him to the front door, the floorboards creaking in protest. The house smelled like pine cleaner and last night's soup. Normal scents, normal life. A normal love, she thought, that should have held. Henry reached for the knob, then paused like he might turn back. If he had looked at her, really looked, she might have forgiven the fear. But he kept his eyes on the door as if it were salvation. And she realized he wasn't leaving her. He was leaving responsibility. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, voice rough with something real. Crystal's throat tightened, but her spine stayed straight. "Intent doesn't change impact," she answered, quiet as snowfall. Henry flinched because truth doesn't ask to be softened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, defeated by his own language. In that moment, she saw how small he felt inside his success. And still, he chose to go. When he stepped onto the porch, the cold swallowed him immediately. The porch light painted his face in pale gold and shadow. Crystal stood in the doorway, not chasing, not collapsing, not begging. Her hands were open at her sides, empty, as if to say, "This is yours." Henry's breath fogged in the air. He looked like he might speak again, but pride and fear tightened around his throat like a rope. He walked down the steps without looking back. The truck door slammed, not angry, final. The headlights cut across the yard, over the fence, toward the fields, and then the engine turned over, and the sound felt like betrayal. Crystal watched the red taillights pull away like two fading embers. She didn't move until they disappeared beyond the curve of the road. Only then did her knees threaten to give out. Only then did the pain finally find its voice. She closed the door and leaned her forehead against the wood. The house was suddenly too big, too quiet, too full of echoes. Every corner held evidence of him. Boots by the mat, a jacket hook, a laugh. She pressed a hand to her chest as if she could hold herself together. Tears came in a slow, humiliating line, hot against the cold air. And still she stayed standing. Because falling felt like permission to be erased. Crystal refused to disappear inside his absence. By morning, Willow Ridge looked the same as it always had. Frost on the grass, smoke from chimneys, the diner's neon buzzing awake. At the small clinic, nurses poured coffee and flipped charts like the world was fine. But Crystal's world was not fine. It was split open, bleeding silently. She drove into town anyway because survival doesn't pause for heartbreak. She smiled at Mrs. Dalloway in the waiting room like nothing was wrong, and she learned how to breathe through a broken place. People noticed, of course, they always did in towns like this. They asked careful questions with sharp curiosity hiding underneath. "Where's Henry? How's work? Are you holding up, sweetheart?" Crystal answered with calm, controlled words, refusing to perform her pain. If she cried in public, it would become entertainment. So she swallowed it, carried it, and took it home like a secret injury. At night, alone, the silence grew louder than any crowd. In the weeks that followed, Henry didn't call. No apology. No explanation that made the leaving make sense. Just distance, stretched thin across highways and time zones. Crystal read that silence like scripture, line by line, until it scarred. If love could vanish this easily, she thought, then love was not enough. She stopped checking her phone before bed. She started learning what it meant to choose herself. One evening, a storm rolled in fast, turning the sky black by 5. Crystal stood on her porch again, watching the fields bow under the wind. It felt like the world was reenacting the moment he left on repeat. She pulled her coat tighter and whispered into the dark. Not to him, but to God. "Don't let this break me," she said, voice steady, hands trembling. The wind answered with a howl, and she didn't back away. If she was going to survive, she would have to become someone new. And somewhere far from Willow Ridge, Henry sat in a bright city office. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that freedom would feel like relief. But at night, when the applause faded and the lights went out, guilt moved in. He pictured Crystal's face in the doorway, calm, wounded, unforgettable. Her silence haunted him more than tears ever would have, because he had expected her to fall apart. And she hadn't, and that frightened him into remembering what he'd lost. The first week after Henry left moved like heavy fog. Crystal went to work, spoke politely, did everything correctly. But inside, her thoughts circled the same raw question. How could a love that felt real end without a real ending? She replayed the last seconds like a scene she could edit. If she had said one different sentence, would he have stayed? Then she hated herself for bargaining with abandonment. At night, the farmhouse became a museum of his absence. The empty hook by the door looked like an accusation. The other side of the bed stayed cold, perfectly made, untouched. She tried reading, tried prayer, tried turning on the TV for noise. Nothing drowned out the sound of being left behind. Silence filled the rooms and pressed against her ribs. Even the clock seemed to tick louder to mock her. In Willow Ridge, heartbreak never stayed private for long. At the diner, conversations paused when she walked in. Not cruelly, just that small-town pause that tastes like pity. "Mrs." Harlan squeezed her hand and said, "Honey, I'm so sorry." Crystal nodded and smiled the way strong women learn to smile. She refused to become a story people passed around with coffee, so she carried her pain like a hidden bruise under clothing. The clinic kept her moving and movement kept her alive. She checked vitals, refilled charts, comforted trembling hands. Some days she felt like a fraud, giving others hope while drowning. But she also remembered something important in those hallways. Life did not stop for anyone's broken heart. Babies were still born, old men still needed oxygen, and she still had purpose, even if love had failed her. One afternoon, a young mother collapsed in the waiting room. Her toddler clung to her leg, crying, eyes wide with fear. Crystal knelt down, held the child's tiny shoulders and spoke softly. "It's okay. We're here. We're not leaving you," she promised. The words hit Crystal like a punch, because she meant them. She realized she still believed in staying even after being abandoned. That realization hurt and healed all at once. On the drive home, rain began to fall in thin, icy lines. Crystal pulled over near the fields and let herself breathe. Not the shallow breaths she'd been surviving on, but real air. She cried in the car, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not because she was weak, but because she was tired of pretending. When the storm eased, she wiped her face and whispered, "Enough. Enough waiting, enough bargaining, enough shrinking to fit his absence." The next day, she called a therapist in the next town over. Her finger hovered over the dial like it weighed 100 pounds. She had always been the one who handled things alone. But healing, she was learning, wasn't a solo performance. When the receptionist answered, Crystal's voice cracked, then steadied. "I need an appointment," she said, clear as truth. And for the first time, she chose support instead of silence. She began walking every morning before work. The air was sharp, the roads quiet, the town still half asleep. Each step felt like a small rebellion against despair. She watched the sun push through clouds like a promise refusing to die. Sometimes she prayed, sometimes she said nothing at all, but she kept walking, because forward was the only direction that saved her. And slowly her body learned it could carry grief without collapsing. Henry still didn't call, and that became its own message. At first she checked her phone like a ritual, hungry for proof. Then she stopped, not out of bitterness, out of self-respect. She told herself the truth. Love that disappears isn't love you can build on. Some nights she wanted to hate him because hate would be simpler. But what she felt was deeper. Sadness, disappointment, and the sting of betrayal. And underneath it all, a fierce determination not to be defined by him. Weeks turned into months, and winter settled over Willow Ridge. Snow dusted the fences and the fields slept under white blankets. Crystal decorated her porch with simple lights, not for romance, just warmth. The town held its annual charity drive at the community center. Crystal signed up to organize medical supplies and winter kits. She didn't do it to distract herself. She did it because she cared. And caring gave her life shape when love had torn it apart. During one late volunteer night, the power flickered out. A generator kicked on, casting the hallway in amber shadows. People laughed nervously, passing flashlights around like campfire stories. Crystal stood in the dim light and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue her from darkness. She was already the kind of woman who could light the room herself. And that realization landed in her chest like quiet strength. Her therapist asked gently, "What do you miss most?" Crystal wanted to say, his hands, his laugh, the plans they made. But what came out was the real wound underneath all the others. "I miss feeling chosen," she admitted, voice small but honest. The therapist nodded as if Crystal had finally spoken her own language. Then she said, "We're going to teach you how to choose yourself first." And Crystal felt both terrified and relieved to hear it. She started changing things in the farmhouse. Not dramatically, just deliberately, one corner at a time. She moved the couch, painted the guest room, replaced old curtains. Each change was a message to her nervous system. Life can be rewritten. She boxed up Henry's forgotten items and stored them in the attic. Not because she hated him, but because she needed space to breathe. A home can't heal you if it keeps reopening the wound. Spring came late that year, like it was hesitant to arrive. Mud softened the roads and buds appeared on stubborn branches. Crystal planted herbs in small pots by the kitchen window. She watched them grow with the patience she didn't know she had. Growth didn't shout. It unfolded quietly, day after day. She realized healing was the same. No fireworks, just steady return. And she found herself smiling at sunlight without feeling guilty for it. One afternoon, she ran into Henry's mother outside the grocery store. The woman looked older, her eyes lined with worry and apology. "Crystal," she said softly, as if the name itself carried regret. Crystal's chest tightened, but she didn't flee. "I don't know what happened," the woman admitted, voice trembling. Crystal nodded once. "Neither do I," she answered, calm as stone. Then she walked away, choosing peace over explanation she wasn't given. That night, Crystal stood in front of the mirror and studied herself. She didn't look like the girl Henry left behind. Her eyes held more depth now, more gravity, more clarity. She whispered, "I will not beg for what should be freely given." The sentence felt like a vow, not a defense. Because she still believed in love, just not in love that demands self-erasure. And for the first time, her future felt like something she owned. By summer, Crystal had become a familiar kind of strong. Not loud, not bitter, strong like a tree that survives storms. The clinic director offered her a leadership role in a new outreach program. Mobile checkups for farmers, free screenings, community health nights. Crystal said yes, and she meant it with her whole heart. She wasn't rebuilding to prove anything to Henry. She was rebuilding because she deserved a life that didn't depend on him. And then, on a warm evening when the sky burned orange, Crystal sat on her porch steps and listened to the crickets sing. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Calm. Not the calm of numbness, the calm of peace earned the hard way. She didn't know Henry would return, not yet. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet truth had taken root. If he ever came back, he would meet a woman who had learned to live. Willow Ridge woke up to late summer heat and routine. The diner poured coffee, the clinic opened its doors, the fields breathed. Crystal moved through her morning like someone who had earned her calm. She wore her hair up, sleeves rolled, clipboard tucked to her chest. The outreach program had a full schedule. Farm visits, screenings, supplies. Her life felt full in a way it never had when she was waiting. And that was exactly why the return hit like thunder. It started with whispers before it became a fact. A truck with out-of-state plates at the gas station. A familiar silhouette near the hardware store. Head lowered. Mrs. Harlan leaning across the diner counter saying, "You heard?" Crystal didn't ask who because her body already knew. That old ache stirred, not welcomed, recognized like an old scar. But she kept her face steady and finished her shift. By noon, the rumor had a name and a shape. Henry Caldwell was back in town after 3 years away. He wasn't visiting for a day. He'd checked into the inn on Main Street. He'd been seen speaking with the bank manager and the town councilman. People said he looked different, thinner, quieter, eyes less arrogant. Others said success had followed him like a shadow. Money, title, influence. And the town began to watch the way small towns always do. Crystal found out officially when the clinic director called her in. "There's someone funding part of our new mobile unit," he said carefully. Crystal blinked, confused because funding was hard to come by here. He slid a paper across the desk with a name at the bottom. Her fingers tightened around the edge before she read it twice. Henry Caldwell. And suddenly, the room felt smaller than her breath. For a moment, she wanted to laugh, sharp, disbelieving, protective. Of course he came back with money. Of course, the town would praise it, but something in her refused to reduce him to a villain or a savior. She had grown past simple stories. Still, her chest burned with one question she couldn't swallow. Why now? Why after she had finally learned to live without him? Henry, across town, sat in the inn's small dining room alone. He stared at his phone like it was a confession booth. Unread drafts of messages filled his screen and then disappeared. He had rehearsed this return in his mind 100 times. But reality had teeth, and he was the one walking into them. The waitress set down a plate and asked kindly, "You're Henry, right?" He nodded, and shame flickered before he could hide it. He had imagined Willow Ridge frozen in time, waiting for his footsteps. But the town looked the same and not the same at all. New paint on old buildings, kids grown taller, a new sign for the clinic. And beneath those changes, he sensed a deeper truth. Life had continued without him, as it always does. That truth was humbling in a way success had never been. It made him feel small, and he deserved to feel that. Henry's return wasn't a victory lap. It was a surrender to the weight of what he had done. In the city, he had climbed every ladder placed before him. Promotions, awards, meetings with people who spoke in numbers. But at night, when everything went quiet, Crystal's face came back. Not crying, not begging, just standing there. Silent, steady, wounded. And that silence had become the loudest thing in his life. He didn't come back to win her with words. He had learned words were cheap when you used them to escape, so he made the first move where it mattered. He called the clinic director and offered funding anonymously at first. But anonymity didn't last long in a town like this, and when his name surfaced, Henry didn't deny it or hide. He accepted the stares the way you accept consequences. Crystal drove home that evening with the windows down. The air smelled like sun-warmed earth and cut grass. Her hands stayed calm on the steering wheel, but her mind moved fast. She didn't miss Henry the way she used to. What she felt was sharper, like reality knocking on a door she'd locked. She told herself she would not unravel for a man who once chose leaving. If he wanted to speak, he would meet her strength first. She arrived at the farmhouse and found a package on the porch. No return address, just her name written in careful handwriting. Crystal stared at it, heart thudding like it remembered too much. She carried it inside, set it on the table, and didn't open it immediately. She made tea first, because she was done letting surprises control her body. Then she slid a knife under the tape and lifted the lid. Inside was a medical-grade portable ultrasound device for the outreach van. A note lay on top, folded neatly, no flourish. Crystal unfolded it and read the words in a tight, steady line. "For the work you do, not to earn anything, just to support it." There was no apology in the note, no request, no dramatic plea. Only that simple acknowledgement of her purpose. Crystal's throat tightened because the restraint felt unfamiliar. It felt like change, and change is the most dangerous kind of hope. The next morning, Crystal walked into the clinic early. The nurses gathered around the box like it was a miracle. "Do you know how much this helps us?" one asked, eyes shining. Crystal nodded, forcing her expression into something neutral. She didn't want the town to think she was softened by gifts. But she couldn't deny the truth. This wasn't grandstanding. This was useful, quiet, intentional. By lunchtime, the inevitable happened. Henry walked into the clinic, not striding, not performing. He held the door for an elderly man with a cane. He stepped aside for a mother pushing a stroller. And when he finally entered the hallway, his eyes lifted and found Crystal. He froze, like his body had expected one version of her and met another. Because she wasn't broken. She was radiant in her steadiness. Crystal didn't gasp. She didn't stiffen into drama. She simply met his gaze with calm that took years to build. Henry's face shifted. Regret, awe, fear, something close to grief. He looked like a man who had rehearsed speeches and forgot them all. "Crystal," he said, voice low, careful, like he was stepping onto thin ice. She nodded once. Henry. 2 names and a whole history trembling behind them. He expected anger, maybe tears. maybe a shaking voice. What he got was composure that made him feel exposed. Crystal's eyes didn't ask for explanations. They demanded truth. Henry swallowed, hands loose at his sides like he didn't deserve to reach. "I didn't come to disrupt your life," he said quietly. She tilted her head, calm and unafraid. "Then why are you here?" And the question landed like a verdict. For a second, Henry looked down as if pride still lived in his bones. Then he lifted his eyes again and his voice changed. "Because I finally understand what I did," he admitted. "No excuse. No story that makes it noble." He paused, breath shallow. "And because I couldn't keep living like I didn't." Crystal's face didn't soften yet, but something in her chest stirred, dangerously. Not forgiveness, not love, just the recognition of honesty. The hallway felt too quiet, even with people moving nearby. Crystal stepped back, not running, choosing space on her terms. "If you want to talk," she said, steady as the ground under them, "you'll do it without pressure, without gifts, and without expecting anything." Henry nodded immediately, like the word anything hurt but deserved to. "I understand," he said. And for the first time, he truly sounded humbled. Crystal turned away and Henry watched her leave, realizing the return had begun but redemption had not. 2 days passed before Crystal agreed to meet him, not because she was unsure of her strength, but because she honored it. She chose the place with intention. The old greenhouse behind the community center. It smelled like soil and sun, and the glass walls held the light gently. No crowds, no diner gossip, no familiar corners that belonged to their past. Just space for truth to exist without performance, and a table that felt neutral like a starting line. Henry arrived early, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders stiff. He looked like a man who had learned restraint through pain. When Crystal walked in, he stood, but he didn't step forward. That alone told her something had changed. The old Henry used to fill rooms with certainty and charm. This Henry looked like he had discovered consequences are real. Crystal sat down slowly, eyes steady, heart guarded. "I'm not here for a scene," she said first. Her voice was calm, but calm doesn't mean gentle. "I'm not here to punish you either." Henry swallowed like he had expected fire and found ice. Crystal continued, "I agreed to this because you asked to speak." Then she leaned back, hands folded, spine straight. "So speak, Henry. Start with the truth." Henry stared at the tabletop for a beat too long. In the silence, Crystal could feel his old instincts deflect, justify, escape. Then he exhaled, slow and controlled, like he was unlearning survival. "I left because I was afraid," he said, voice rough. "Afraid of failing you. Afraid you'd see who I really was." Crystal didn't blink. And who was that? Henry's jaw tightened. A man who didn't feel enough. Crystal let the words hang in the air. Fear, she thought, always sounds innocent when it belongs to the person who ran. But fear had consequences, and she lived in them. "You didn't just leave," she said quietly. "You removed choice from my life." Henry's face flinched, as if the sentence had a physical edge. Crystal added, "You made me wake up to a new reality without my consent." Henry's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "I know," he said, voice softer now, stripped of defense. "I told myself I was sparing you, that you deserved someone better." Crystal's eyes sharpened. "Don't do that." He looked up, confused. "That story is still about protecting your pride," she said. "If you cared, you would have stayed and fought for us." The greenhouse creaked faintly as wind moved outside. Crystal stared at him with the steady gaze of a woman who had survived. "I spent months blaming myself," she admitted without drama. "I replayed that night until it turned into a wound that wouldn't close." Henry's eyes filled, but tears didn't fall. Crystal continued, "Do you know what it does to someone, Henry? To be left without explanation in a town that watches you breathe?" Henry's throat worked like he was swallowing broken glass. "I was selfish," he said. "I was immature. I was proud." Crystal nodded once because she respected accuracy. "Pride is expensive," she answered. It cost her sleep, appetite, stability, trust. It cost her the version of herself who believed love could be safe. And it cost him the right to return as if time owed him anything. Henry leaned forward slightly, then stopped himself. "I'm not asking you to forgive me quickly. he said. "I'm not asking you to pretend it didn't happen." Crystal studied him, searching for manipulation, for rehearsed charm. But his voice didn't carry entitlement. It carried grief. Clean, uncomfortable, deserved. Crystal's heart didn't soften, but it listened. "Why now?" she asked, finally letting the question out. Not bitter, not pleading, just factual. Henry looked down, then up like he didn't want to hide anymore. "Because I couldn't outrun it," he admitted. "I built success to prove I was strong." His voice dropped. "But at night I felt like a coward with a title, and I kept seeing you, standing there, silent, strong, unreplaced." Crystal's fingers tightened together under the table. "You don't get to romanticize my survival," she said calmly. Henry's face flushed with shame. "You're right," he whispered. Crystal continued, "I survived because I had to, not because it was beautiful." The air between them pulsed with truth. Henry nodded slowly, absorbing every word like penance. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time it didn't sound like a phrase. Crystal looked past him, through the greenhouse glass at the world outside. "I learned to live without you," she said softly. "I learned how to breathe alone." Henry's eyes trembled with something raw. Crystal's voice stayed steady. "And it changed me. I became someone who doesn't beg, someone who doesn't chase." She turned back to him. "So understand this. You don't return to the old Crystal." Henry's shoulders sank like a man laying down armor. "I don't want the old Crystal," he said carefully. "I want to know the woman you became." Crystal studied him, skeptical, but attentive. "That sounds pretty," she said, "but pretty isn't proof." Henry nodded once. "I know." He paused. "That's why I'm not here with speeches. I'm here with consistency." Crystal held his gaze, testing his patience. "If you want a place in my life," she said, "you'll follow my pace. No pressure, no surprise visits, no public grand gestures." Henry breathed out, relieved by the clarity, even though it hurt. "I accept that," he said immediately. Crystal continued, "And no gifts aimed at my heart." Henry nodded. "I'll support the clinic because it matters, not because it's leverage." Crystal let a quiet silence settle, like dust after a storm. Then she said the sentence that defined her boundary. "I won't be your lesson," she told him. Henry's brow furrowed. Crystal's voice was gentle but unmovable. "You don't get to hurt me, grow from it, and come back expecting a reward." Henry's eyes burned. "I know," he said, voice breaking. "And you're right." For the first time, Henry looked like he wanted to cry. But he didn't make it her job to comfort him. He sat in the discomfort like a man finally willing to feel. "I'm not asking for a reward," he said. "I'm asking for the chance to do what I should have done back then." Crystal's heart clenched, but she didn't surrender to it. "Doing right now doesn't erase what you did," she answered. Henry nodded, eyes steady. "I'll take whatever place you're willing to give," he said, "even if it's only the place of someone who helps and then leaves you alone." Crystal watched him carefully. He sounded honest, and honesty was dangerous, because it planted seeds where she'd burned the ground for safety. Crystal stood up slowly. "Then we start there," she said. Henry rose too, keeping distance, respecting the boundary without being told twice. Crystal picked up her coat, her eyes holding his one last time. "This is not forgiveness," she said, clear as winter air. "This is a beginning. On trial." Henry nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand." Crystal opened the greenhouse door and stepped into the light, and Henry remained inside for a moment longer, realizing redemption wasn't a moment. It was 1,000 quiet choices he would have to earn. Henry didn't call the next day, and that surprised Crystal. Not because she wanted him to, but because she expected impatience. The old Henry used to push until he got a clear answer. This Henry moved like someone who had learned restraint. For a week his presence stayed distant, felt more than seen. And in that distance, Crystal noticed a new emotion rise. Not longing, but cautious curiosity. The outreach van's first big route was scheduled for Friday. Farmers along County Road 9 had been missing screenings for years. Crystal prepared supplies, checked forms, organized a rotation of volunteers. She moved with purpose, the kind that keeps wounds from reopening. But beneath the lists and clipboards, her body remembered. The moment before something changes always feels like a held breath, and Willow Ridge was holding its breath again. On Thursday afternoon, the clinic director called Crystal into his office. Henry offered to cover fuel costs for the outreach routes, he said. Crystal's eyes narrowed, not angry, alert. She had been clear. No gifts aimed at her heart. The director raised both hands. He didn't ask me to tell you. I found out through accounting. Crystal paused, hearing the difference. Support without announcement. Quiet. Help without strings. Friday came bright and warm, sunlight pouring over the fields. The outreach team loaded equipment, coolers, and portable monitors. Crystal checked each volunteer with a steady professionalism. But halfway through loading, the van made a sound that wasn't normal. A sharp clank, then a sputter, then silence. The engine refused to turn over again, and Crystal felt the old panic rise, because delays meant people went unseen. The volunteers looked at each other, helpless, half embarrassed. A mechanic appointment would take days, maybe longer. Crystal's jaw tightened, not from pride, but from urgency. She imagined the farmers who had taken off work to be there. Men who never asked for help, women who waited until pain became unbearable. This route mattered, and the town's fragile trust in the program could break with one failure. Crystal stepped away and made calls, voice calm like steel. The local mechanic was out of town. The backup vehicle was already being used for a transport run. Even the towing service said they couldn't get there until late afternoon. Crystal closed her eyes for one long second. Her therapist's voice echoed, "Breathe first, decide second." So she breathed, then turned back to the team with a plan. "We pivot," she said. "We do what we can here at the clinic today." Disappointment moved through the group like a shadow. Crystal hated the feeling, not because it looked bad, but because it cost people care. She grabbed a marker and rewrote the schedule on the whiteboard. Then she saw a volunteer nurse whisper, "Maybe this is a sign we're not ready." Crystal's gaze sharpened gently. "We're ready. We're just inconvenienced." And she refused to let discouragement become destiny. That afternoon, as Crystal walked out to the parking lot, she froze. Henry stood near the outreach van, sleeves rolled, talking to a man in coveralls. He wasn't trying to hide, but he wasn't trying to be seen either. His posture was quiet, attentive, the way men stand when they've stopped performing. Crystal's first instinct was to turn around and avoid him. Her second instinct, newer, stronger, was to face reality without fear. So she walked toward them, calm and unhurried. Henry looked up, and he didn't smile like he expected forgiveness. He nodded, respectful, hands staying at his sides. "The tow service called me," the mechanic said. "Said they were backed up." Crystal blinked. "Why would they call you?" The mechanic gestured to Henry. "He's the one who arranged the maintenance contract for the van." Crystal's stomach tightened with suspicion, until she remembered. Henry had funded the unit, yes, but he had also handled logistics quietly through the director. Crystal turned to Henry, voice even. "You did this?" Henry nodded once. "The contract, yes." No pride in his tone, no expectation of applause. He glanced at the van like it was simply a problem to solve. "I heard the route was important," he said. Crystal held his gaze, waiting for the hidden hook. Henry added, "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to get it running." The mechanic opened the hood and started checking connections. Henry crouched beside him, asking questions, listening, learning. Crystal watched with a strange discomfort in her chest. It wasn't attraction, at least not yet. It was the shock of seeing Henry in a posture she'd never seen before. Not leading, not controlling. Helping, quietly, as if service were the only language that mattered. The repair took 2 hours. Crystal didn't hover. She went back inside, ran the clinic schedule, kept moving. But she kept glancing out the window like her mind couldn't help it. In the heat, Henry's shirt clung to his back, his hands dirty with oil. The old Henry would have hated looking like this, unpolished, unimportant. This Henry stayed there without complaint, and something in Crystal's chest loosened by a fraction. When the engine finally turned over, the sound felt like a small victory. The volunteers cheered, relieved and grateful. Henry stepped back, wiping his hands with a rag, saying nothing. He didn't accept praise, didn't tell a story, didn't make it about him. Crystal walked out and stopped a few feet away from him. "Thank you," she said. Simple, honest, controlled. Henry nodded. "You're welcome," he replied, like gratitude wasn't currency to him anymore. The outreach route still ran, late, but it ran. Crystal drove the van herself, refusing to let the day steal their mission. The farmers were patient, grateful, surprised the clinic came at all. Crystal moved through screenings, blood pressure checks, and gentle conversations. She watched older men soften under kindness, watched proud women admit fear. This was the work she loved, staying where people expected abandonment. And every time she looked at the van, she remembered Henry's hands under the hood. That night, the team returned tired but satisfied. As volunteers unloaded supplies, Crystal saw Henry across the lot again. He was placing bottled water and snacks on a table for the staff. No announcement, no gift baskets, just basic care for tired bodies. Crystal's throat tightened in a way that annoyed her, because she had built walls for survival, and his actions kept finding small doors. Still, she didn't run from it. She simply noticed. Henry approached her only when everyone else had gone inside. He stopped at a respectful distance, eyes calm. "I'm not asking for time," he said. I'm glad the route happened." Crystal crossed her arms, posture protective but not hostile. "You didn't have to show up," she said. Henry nodded. "I know," then he added, voice low, "but I should have shown up a long time ago." Crystal's breath caught, but she didn't let him see how deeply it landed. She looked past him, watching the last light fade behind the fields. "You can't rewrite that," she said quietly. Henry's voice didn't argue. "No, but I can live differently now." He paused as if weighing each word. "I'll keep my promise, no pressure, no performances." Crystal nodded once. "Good," she said, "because I'm watching." Henry didn't step closer. He didn't ask for a hug or a second chance. He simply nodded, like accountability was something he could finally carry. Then he turned and walked to his truck, leaving her space and silence. Crystal stood alone for a moment, surprised by the calm in her chest. His absence used to feel like a wound. Tonight, his distance felt like respect. And that difference, small, quiet, was the first crack in the wall she swore would never break. The first cold front of the season arrived without warning. Wind tore through Willow Ridge like it had unfinished business. Clouds swallowed the sunset early, turning the town gray by 5. Crystal locked up the clinic later than usual, shoulders tense. Storms always made her body remember that night he left. Not because she was fragile, because trauma has its own calendar. And the air felt exactly like a page she never wanted to reread. The outreach program had a supply run scheduled for the morning. Crystal stayed late labeling boxes and confirming volunteer lists. Her phone buzzed with messages, patients, staff, last-minute changes. She moved through it all with practiced control. But when she glanced at the date on the wall calendar, her stomach dropped. 3 years ago, almost to the hour, Henry had walked away. Her hands went cold, and she hated that her body still knew. Driving home, the wind shoved at her car like a warning. Tree branches whipped the roadside, shadows flickering across the windshield. She kept her eyes forward and reminded herself she was safe. The farmhouse lights appeared through the darkness like a small promise. Crystal pulled into the driveway and noticed something strange. Her porch light was out. A tiny detail, but it made the night feel suddenly unprotected. Crystal stepped out into the wind, coat tugging at her shoulders. She walked up the porch steps and tried the switch inside. Nothing. The light stayed dead, the doorway swallowed by darkness. Crystal exhaled slowly, refusing to let fear make decisions. She grabbed a flashlight from her car and aimed it at the porch. The bulb had likely burned out, simple as that. But the memory of standing in that doorway alone still clung to the wood. Inside, she checked the breaker box and replaced the bulb. The porch light flickered back on, warm and steady. Crystal stood there for a moment, watching that circle of light. The same circle Henry had once stepped out of. Her chest tightened, old pain waking like a sleeping animal. She pressed a hand against her sternum and whispered, "Not tonight," because she had worked too hard to be taken down by a memory. The storm grew louder as she made tea and tried to settle. Wind rattled the windows and thunder rolled far off like distant drums. Crystal sat on the couch, blanket around her shoulders, trying to breathe. Her therapist's voice returned. "Name what you feel. Don't fight it." Crystal closed her eyes. "I feel afraid. I feel angry. I feel alone," she admitted silently, and the honesty made her eyes burn. Her phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't a work message, a number she didn't have saved but her pulse recognized anyway. Crystal stared at the screen like it was a test. She didn't answer. She let it ring until it stopped. Then she turned the phone face down, refusing to be dragged backward. If Henry wanted access to her peace, he would earn it in daylight. Tonight belonged to her healing, not his regret. A sudden crack sounded outside, sharp and final. Crystal sat up, heart jumping, breath caught. Another crack followed and the farmhouse lights flickered. Then everything went dark at once, swallowed by storm and silence. The power outage wasn't dramatic, but it was terrifying in its timing. The porch light, her small circle of safety, was gone again. Crystal's throat tightened as the past knocked hard at the door of the present. She grabbed her flashlight and moved through the house calmly. Not panicked, prepared, the way strong women become after survival. She checked the breaker box, everything looked fine. The outage was likely town-wide, but that didn't stop her nerves. Wind slammed something against the side of the house. Crystal flinched, then steadied herself. She would not be reduced to a trembling girl in her own home. She lit a few candles and sat at the kitchen table. The small flames made the room feel ancient and intimate. Outside, the storm raged, and inside, her memories raged with it. Crystal stared at her hands, seeing the past in the lines of her palms. She remembered standing in this same house, begging God not to break her. She remembered the taste of humiliation in town, the endless nights, and she realized something she had avoided for months. She was still carrying it. Crystal's breath began to shallow, chest tightening. Not a breakdown. Something worse. A quiet panic trying to take control. She stood up, walked to the sink, and ran cold water over her wrists. "Breathe," she whispered aloud, because hearing her own voice helped. In the dark, she felt the loneliness sharpen. Her mind tried to call Henry 100 different names. Then she hated herself for even thinking his presence could soothe her. Another loud crash came from outside, followed by the sound of breaking wood. Crystal's heartbeat turned violent in her ears. She moved to the window carefully and aimed her flashlight out. A large branch had fallen against the fence near the driveway. It wasn't life-threatening, but it blocked part of the entrance. And if the wind got worse, more could fall. Crystal swallowed hard, realizing she couldn't fix it alone tonight. Her phone, face down on the table, felt heavier than it should. Crystal stared at it, jaw tight, pride fighting practicality. She didn't want to call Henry, not because she needed him, but because she feared needing. Needing had gotten her hurt before, but she also knew the difference now. Asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Crystal picked up the phone with shaking fingers and opened her contacts. She didn't call him, not yet. Instead, she called the neighbor 2 miles down, Mr. Dalloway. No answer. She tried the next number. Still no answer. The storm had knocked out cell coverage in patches. Crystal's throat tightened, frustration rising. Then her phone buzzed again with the same unknown number. This time she answered without speaking. "Crystal." Henry's voice came through, low, careful, steady. It wasn't demanding, and that mattered. "I heard the power's out on your road," he said. Crystal closed her eyes, anger and relief mixing like storm water. "How did you know?" she asked, voice controlled. "I'm helping the clinic secure equipment," Henry replied. "The director mentioned your route." He paused. "Are you okay?" Crystal wanted to say yes immediately, to keep control. But the truth rose up like a tide she couldn't command. "My fence line. A branch fell. she said, hating the tremor. Silence filled the line for one beat. Then Henry said, "I'm coming, only to clear it. I'll leave after." Crystal's chest tightened with resistance. "No pressure," she warned. "I know," he answered softly. "I'll stay outside unless you ask." 20 minutes later, headlights cut through the storm. Henry's truck pulled into the driveway carefully, tires crunching gravel. Crystal watched from the window, candlelight behind her. Henry got out wearing a heavy coat, gloves, and a headlamp. He didn't knock. He didn't step onto the porch. He walked straight to the fallen branch and started working. In the wind and rain, he looked small and human, not powerful. Crystal stood there, heart pounding, tears threatening for reasons she couldn't explain. Henry's presence wasn't romantic in that moment. It was steady, practical, respectful, everything he hadn't been that night long ago. When the branch finally shifted free and the driveway cleared, Henry stepped back. He looked up at her window, rain dripping from his hair, eyes searching but not demanding. Crystal didn't open the door, but she didn't turn away either. And in the candle-lit silence of her home, she realized the past had knocked. Yet this time she had not been left alone. Morning arrived with a pale, exhausted light. The storm had passed, leaving puddles, scattered branches, and quiet damage. Power returned in uneven waves across town, like hope coming back slowly. Crystal woke with a stiff neck and a strange heaviness in her chest. Not regret, not longing, just the awareness that Henry had come when it mattered, and the deeper awareness that it didn't erase what he'd done. At the clinic, everyone talked about the storm like it was a shared battle. Generators, spoiled groceries, flooded basements, broken fences. Someone mentioned, casually, Henry was out helping people all night. Crystal kept her face neutral, but her stomach tightened. In a town like Willow Ridge, helpfulness becomes a headline, and headlines become pressure, especially when the story involves her. She refused to let the town decide what his actions meant to her heart. By lunchtime, whispers had turned into certainty. "He cleared Crystal's driveway," someone said with a knowing smile. Another voice replied, "Maybe he's finally doing right." Crystal washed her hands in the staff bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. The old version of her would have felt exposed, humiliated, reduced to gossip. This version stood taller, jaw set, eyes calm. She would not be handled like a plot line in someone else's romance. Henry didn't come to the clinic that day. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't angle for emotional credit. Instead, a shipment arrived. Tarps, gloves, bottled water, flashlights. Not addressed to Crystal, addressed to the clinic for storm relief. Crystal watched the staff unload it, hearing their gratitude. No one mentioned his name at first, but it floated beneath the surface. And Crystal hated how easily the town began to admire him again. That evening, Crystal attended a community meeting at the church hall. They were organizing repairs for elderly residents and farm families. The room smelled like coffee and wet coats, the mood earnest but tired. Crystal sat near the front with her clipboard, focused on logistics. Then the door opened and Henry walked in quietly. Not late, not dramatic, just present, like a man choosing responsibility. The room's energy shifted, and Crystal felt it in her bones. Henry didn't take a central seat. He stood near the back at first, listening, hands folded. When the pastor asked for volunteers to clear debris and fix fences, Henry raised his hand without looking around for approval. "I've got chainsaws and tools," he said, "and I can cover fuel costs." Crystal's jaw tightened because money was his easy language. But then Henry added, "I'll be there. I'll do the work." After the meeting, people swarmed him like forgiveness was contagious. Men clapped his shoulder. Women smiled warmly. Crystal watched from a distance, heart guarded. Not because she wanted him shamed forever, but because she feared speed. The town was ready to absolve him in a week. Crystal had carried the consequences for years. She wasn't cruel. She was careful. Henry's eyes found hers across the room, and he didn't approach. He simply nodded, acknowledging her presence like a quiet promise. Crystal nodded back, a fraction of respect she didn't intend to give. Then she turned away, returning to her work list. Later, as she walked to her car, she found him outside. He stayed by the curb, not blocking her path, leaving space. "I won't keep you," he said immediately. I just wanted to thank you. Crystal stopped, surprised. For what? For leading, Henry replied, voice steady. You've held this town together through the clinic and the outreach. Crystal's throat tightened, because acknowledgement is intimate. She looked at him carefully, searching for manipulation. But his eyes stayed calm, not hungry. Crystal exhaled. Don't praise me like it makes you smaller, she warned. Henry nodded once, accepting the correction without offense. I'm not praising you to punish myself, he said. I'm praising you because it's true, and I ignored it before. Crystal's chest tightened again, the dangerous kind of tightness. I didn't need you to notice, she said, though part of her once had. Henry's voice softened. I know. But you deserve to be seen anyway. Silence stretched, and the truth sat between them like something sacred. The next morning, they both showed up at Mrs. Whitaker's farm. The elderly woman's fence had collapsed under the storm's fallen oak. Volunteers gathered, tired but determined, boots sinking into wet ground. Crystal organized supplies while Henry worked with the men on the heavy lifting. He didn't take over. He asked where he could fit. Crystal watched him lift broken wood, haul debris, sweat in the cold air, and she realized he wasn't trying to look heroic. He was trying to be useful. Mrs. Whitaker brought out lemonade in a cracked glass pitcher. She offered Henry a cup and said softly, You hurt a good girl, Henry. The words fell into the air like stones into water. Crystal stiffened, embarrassed for reasons she didn't want to own. But Henry didn't snap or defend himself. He nodded and answered, Yes, ma'am, I did. No excuses, no performance, just truth. Later, while volunteers rested, Crystal found Henry stacking boards alone. His hands were scratched, knuckles red, sleeves smeared with dirt. Something about the image pulled at her, not romance, but reality. Crystal approached and stopped 2 feet away. You didn't have to come, she said, repeating the boundary like a ritual. Henry didn't look up right away. I know, he replied. Then he added, But I'm tired of being the man who leaves. The sentence hit Crystal harder than she expected. Because it wasn't poetic. It wasn't charming. It sounded like a vow made in private, with no audience. Crystal swallowed, feeling her walls tremble. You can't just decide to be different, she said quietly. Henry finally looked up, eyes steady. No, he agreed. I have to prove it. And his certainty wasn't arrogance. It was commitment. A few days later, Crystal's outreach van got stuck in mud near Miller Creek. The road had softened after the storm, turning into a trap. The team tried pushing, but the tires only spun deeper. Crystal's frustration rose, sharp and familiar. Failure always tried to sound like a prophecy. Then a truck pulled up behind them, slow and careful. Henry stepped out with toe straps, expression focused, no questions asked. He didn't say, I'm here to save you. He simply asked, Where do you need the strap connected? Crystal pointed, refusing to let pride become sabotage. Henry worked fast, steady hands, clear communication. When the van finally shifted free, the volunteers cheered again. Henry stepped back, letting the relief belong to the team. Crystal stared at him, breath caught, because this was what staying looked like. That evening, as the last volunteer drove off, Crystal lingered by the van. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the fields quiet and wide. Henry stood nearby, wiping his hands, waiting to be dismissed. Crystal surprised herself by speaking first. Do you ever think about that night? She asked, voice low. Henry's eyes softened. Every day, he admitted. And I hate who I was. Crystal nodded slowly. Good, she said, because I can't forgive a man who doesn't understand. Henry took a careful step closer, still leaving room for her to retreat. I understand enough to know I don't deserve speed, he said. Crystal's throat tightened. Emotion rose like a tide she didn't invite. For the first time, she let him see it. Just a flicker of vulnerability. I'm not giving you my heart, she said, voice trembling slightly. Henry nodded, eyes steady. I'm not asking for it. I'm earning the right to be near it. And under the soft light of sunset, Crystal felt the first fragile thread of trust tighten, not into love yet, but into possibility. The town settled into a quieter rhythm after the storm repairs. Fences stood again, roads cleared, roofs patched and steady. But inside Crystal, something was still under construction. Trust doesn't rebuild like a fence. It rebuilds like bone, slow and tender. Henry had shown up again and again without demanding a reward. Still, Crystal refused to confuse effort with entitlement. Because love that redeems must be proven where it once was abandoned. One crisp morning, Crystal received a letter at the clinic. Not a package, not equipment, not something that could be mistaken as leverage. A simple envelope with her name, handwriting careful but familiar. She stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Inside was an invitation to a town council meeting. At the bottom, a brief note from the mayor. "Your voice matters in this." Crystal's stomach tightened. She had fought to stop being watched, and now she was being asked to lead. The meeting was about expanding the clinic's outreach program permanently. Mobile routes, preventive screenings, mental health partnerships, farm safety training. Crystal had built most of the plan in quiet hours and sleepless nights. Now the town wanted to make it official. But there was resistance. Budget concerns, pride, fear of changing the old ways. Crystal listened, calm, taking notes like she was made of steadiness. Then she stood, and her voice changed the room without raising volume. "This program isn't charity," she said. "It's dignity. Farmers shouldn't have to choose between a checkup and keeping their land. Mothers shouldn't wait until fear becomes an emergency. Mental health shouldn't be treated like a weakness in silence." She spoke from experience, not anger, not performance. Her pain had matured into purpose, and the town could feel it. Even the loudest skeptics went quiet when they heard the truth in her tone. Henry sat in the back row, unseen by most. He didn't speak, didn't interrupt, didn't try to attach himself to her moment. He simply watched with something like reverence. Because this Crystal, steady, articulate, grounded, was a woman forged in fire. And Henry knew he had been the match that started it. He didn't feel proud of that. He felt humbled by her resilience. He felt the weight of how easily he could have lost her forever. When the vote passed to expand the program, the room erupted softly. Not cheers. Relief, gratitude, a quiet sense of rightness. Crystal exhaled, fingers shaking slightly as she gathered her papers. People congratulated her, and she accepted it with measured warmth. Outside, night air bit with early winter, stars sharp above Main Street. Crystal stepped into the cold and breathed like a woman stepping into a new chapter. Then she saw Henry standing by her car, keeping distance as always. "I won't keep you," Henry said before she could speak. Crystal almost smiled at the familiar sentence, his newest form of respect. "You came to the meeting," she observed, voice neutral. Henry nodded. "I wanted to hear you, not to be seen." Crystal studied him in the streetlight, noticing the weariness in his eyes. Success still clung to him. Better coat, cleaner truck, confident posture. But pride no longer sat on his face like a crown. "You looked powerful in there," Henry said, careful with the word. Crystal's gaze sharpened. "Don't romanticize it," she warned again. Henry nodded immediately. "I won't," he said. Then he added, quieter, "But I need you to know something." Crystal's body tensed, old instincts preparing for disappointment. Henry held up a hand slightly, signaling patience. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "Just telling the truth." Crystal's breath slowed. "Then tell it," she said. Henry swallowed, eyes fixed on the gravel as if confession required humility. "I left because I thought love needed certainty," he began. "I thought if I couldn't guarantee forever, I didn't deserve to try." He looked up, voice rough. "So I ran and called it responsibility." Crystal's throat tightened. She didn't interrupt. Henry continued, "But I've learned love isn't certainty. It's presence. It's staying." Crystal felt her heart shift, like a door moving on rusty hinges. She hated that his words were true, because truth makes walls pointless. But she didn't give him softness for free. "And what happens when it gets hard again?" she asked quietly. Henry's face didn't flinch. "Then I stay anyway," he answered, not as a promise designed to impress, more like a decision already made. Crystal searched his eyes looking for the old cowardice and found something steadier. They stood in silence long enough for the town's noise to fade. A car passed, headlights sweeping over them like a brief spotlight. Crystal's voice came softer, not because she weakened, but because she chose honesty. "I learned to live without you," she said. Henry nodded, eyes shining with regret. "That's what changed everything," Crystal continued. "Because I don't need you to survive." She held his gaze. "So if I choose you, it won't be desperation. It will be strength." Henry's breath shook, and he looked away like he was trying not to break. "That's all I ever wanted," he whispered. Crystal tilted her head, assessing him. "No," she corrected gently. "You wanted comfort. You wanted certainty. You wanted the easy version of love." Henry nodded, accepting the truth like a bruise he deserved. "You're right," he said, "and I lost the real version because I didn't value it." Crystal's chest tightened, emotion rising, but she stayed anchored. A week later, Henry asked for one more conversation. On her terms. Crystal chose the place this time, the farmhouse porch, under the repaired light. The air smelled like wood smoke and cold earth, a hint of winter coming. Henry arrived without gifts, without plans, without a script. He sat on the porch step below her, lower than her chair, not as a performance, just a quiet symbol of humility he didn't announce. Crystal watched him carefully, waiting for the real moment to reveal itself. Henry looked out at the fields, then back at her. "I want to rebuild something with you," he said softly. "Not what we had. Something new." Crystal's eyes narrowed slightly, because new required risk. Henry continued, "I've bought the old Miller property at the edge of town." Crystal stiffened, alarm rising. Money again, control again, maybe. But Henry shook his head quickly. "Listen, please. I'm turning it into a permanent outreach and family wellness center," he said. "Not under my name. Under the clinic's board." Crystal blinked, stunned despite herself. Henry's voice trembled. "It'll have counseling rooms, a small pharmacy, training space, a daycare corner. I'm funding it," he admitted. "But I'm not owning it." Crystal's throat tightened with something sharp and unfamiliar. Safety. Because this wasn't about impressing her. It was about correcting what he broke in the community too. Crystal stared at him, breath caught between fear and hope. "You're doing this because you feel guilty," she said, testing the motive. Henry nodded once. "Yes," he admitted, "and because I believe in what you built." Crystal's eyes burned. "And what about me?" she asked quietly. Henry lifted his gaze, steady and unafraid of her power. "I want you," he said, "but only if your yes is free." Then he added, voice breaking, "If your answer is no, I'll still build this. I'll still stay." Crystal's silence stretched. Long, sacred, terrifying. She looked at the porch light above them, remembering darkness. She looked at Henry's hands, remembering him under the hood in the rain. She looked at her own life, full, steady, rebuilt, and she realized the forgiveness forming inside her wasn't surrender. It was release, letting the past stop driving the car. Crystal leaned forward, reached out, and touched Henry's cheek gently, like a decision. Henry froze, breath caught, eyes shining like he didn't deserve tenderness. Crystal's voice was soft, but it carried the weight of years. "I forgive you," she said, "not because it didn't cost me, but because I refuse to carry it anymore." Henry's eyes filled, and this time tears slipped free without shame. Crystal cupped his face with both hands and pulled him closer, slow, deliberate. Their kiss wasn't desperate. It was earned, steady and warm under the porch light. And when they finally parted, Crystal whispered, "This time we build it right, together." And Henry answered, "This time, I stay." The first snowfall of the season came softly, like the town was learning gentleness again. It covered Willow Ridge in quiet white, turning fence posts into silhouettes and the fields into a clean page. Crystal stood at the clinic window and watched the flakes fall without fear of what winter meant. Because this time, the cold didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a beginning, slow, steady, honest. The Wellness Center project moved forward without fanfare. No grand announcement, No ribbon cutting designed to impress strangers. Just work, blueprints on tables, volunteers carrying boxes, contractors measuring walls. Henry kept showing up in the same quiet way he had learned to show up everywhere else. He didn't speak about redemption like it was a speech. He lived it like it was a daily decision. And Crystal watched him choose that decision even when no one was watching. Some nights, she still woke up with old memories in her throat. The sound of a truck leaving, the porch light cutting into the dark, the ache of being left. But now, when those memories rose, Henry didn't try to fix them with words. He sat beside her in silence, steady as a heartbeat, and whispered, "I'm here." Not once in a dramatic moment, but every time until her nervous system believed what her heart didn't dare assume. That love could be safe when it was built through actions. Crystal didn't become soft because Henry returned. She became soft because she was no longer afraid that softness would destroy her. She had learned to live without him, so now she could love him without losing herself. And Henry didn't return to reclaim her like she was unfinished business. He returned to honor her, to serve what she had built, to stay where he once ran. He loved her like a man who understood love isn't proven by intensity. It's proven by consistency. On the night the wellness center received its final approval, the town gathered quietly. String lights glowed in the cold air, warm against the winter sky. Crystal stood beside Henry as the pastor prayed over the building and the people it would shelter. When the prayer ended, Henry reached for her hand without looking for permission, and she squeezed back, not as a promise made in words, but as a promise made in the kind of trust that had survived the fire. Later, when the crowd thinned and the snow began again, Henry and Crystal walked behind the building to where the fields stretched wide and silent. The world felt hushed, like it was listening. Henry turned to her, eyes bright with that humbled tenderness that never tried to rush her. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and didn't open it immediately. He simply said, "You don't owe me an answer. I'm not asking for a fairy tale." Then he swallowed, voice thick. "I'm asking for a future I'll spend my life earning." Crystal didn't cry the way the town might expect. She smiled, small, real, steady, because she recognized the man in front of her. Not the man who left. The man who stayed through discomfort, through work, through silence, through proof. She opened the box herself, as if claiming her own choice. Inside was a simple ring, elegant, timeless, honest. Crystal looked up at him and said, "Yes, but understand something." Henry's breath caught. "Anything," he whispered. "This yes," Crystal said, voice soft and unbreakable, "isn't the yes of a woman who needed you to come back. It's the yes of a woman who learned she could survive without you, and still chose to love you because you became safe." Henry's eyes filled and he nodded like a man receiving grace he never deserved. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that shook, then pulled her into his arms slowly, reverently, like love was something holy. They kissed under the falling snow, the string lights behind them glowing warm and golden. No desperation, no chasing, no fear. Just two people, one rebuilt by pain, the other reshaped by regret, choosing a new beginning. And when Henry rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "This time I stay," Crystal smiled and answered, "This time we both do." If this story made you believe in love again, subscribe now and comment, "I choose healing, so I know you stayed until the end."